I think the next NBA superstar is going to be LaMelo Ball. And to me, I feel like super confident about this. I think there's only one thing that could stop this from happening, and that's his ankle injuries. He needs to talk to Steph and figure out what he needs to do to prevent this from being a long-term issue in his career. But, I've always liked LaMelo since his rookie season, but the more I pour into the numbers and the film, this guy is legitimately like a basketball savant in terms of his talent. Like, I don't know. Like, I mean, this is just gonna be a crazy conversation. I acknowledge that. It's fine. I'm gonna say things that sound crazy. I think he's like on the level of like a Luka Doncic in terms of his basketball savantness. Like, okay, the obvious problem is he's only played 58 games the last 2 seasons, so it's super easy to forget about him. But let's start with the metrics. So across the last 3 years, where he's played 133 games, he's never been lower than the 94th percentile in offensive EPM and the 87th percentile in overall EPM. Same span of time for LeBron, the other impact metrics we really care about. He's never been lower than 95th percentile in offensive LeBron, never lower than 88th percentile in overall LeBron. This is a guy who's turning 23 this month, or I think he turned 23 this month. It hasn't even really got real NBA reps yet. 538's Raptor, it's pretty much defunct now, but 2 years ago, they had this projection tool. And the tool had him projected as an eventual MVP candidate. Basically, also, to go along with that MVP candidacy projection, his lowest point within the middle 80% prediction interval was basically the equivalent of a wins above replacement or a WAR as Julius Randle's We Here season. So that's where he led the Knicks to the 4th seed in the East. So just making that more clear, because that was a lot of words. In normal human terms, let's just say that's basically saying that there's a 90% chance that the absolute worst case scenario for LaMelo Ball for his career is for his peak to be as impactful as that Julius Randle season. That's the worst case scenario. That's not the best case scenario. That's the least likely thing to happen, but it won't be worse than that. So all of his metrics grade out to prior to his 23rd birthday as absolutely superstar level potential and possibly low level MVP candidate potential. This is before 23. I'm going to go on. Passing. Why do I think he's going to be so good? I think he's really going to be an offensive engine, the level of a Tyrese Halliburton, and potentially better because of his size and because, honestly, just frankly, he's a better passer than Tyrese Halliburton. Like, a lot of people have this idea Halliburton's like a quote unquote, he's a system point guard or whatever. Anyone could be him if they were in that role. I think that's ridiculous. That's a wild opinion to me. However, if LaMelo was in that Halliburton role, I could imagine him and the Pacers being actually even better. I looked at some B-ball index numbers in terms of passing creation quality. So that's looking at the quality of shots that result from his passes and passing versatility. LaMelo absolutely trounces Tyrese Halliburton. He can make more passes and set guys up for easier shots. The place where Halliburton destroys him is in his passing efficiency. Halliburton is a much lower turnover guy. And, that's probably, in my opinion, because of a combination of, guys not being as open on the Hornets, LaMelo not taking easy passes because he's so gifted that he thinks he can make the most insane passes into insanely small windows, and he does. But I do think his aggression and risk level can be addressed throughout his career. And then, to me, just the overall point here is that he's just a truly unique talent in terms of his passing ability. And I think that's going to make him one of the elite offensive engines in the game, in the school of Trae Young, Tyrese Halliburton, Luka Doncic, spread pick and roll basketball. To belabor the point, I'm gonna stop talking in a second, but I'm gonna just mention an anecdote. Basically, there was this play where LaMelo takes a dribble between his legs from the right to left. I was watching some LaMelo film. He takes a dribble between his legs from right to left. And in the motion of the dribble, he throws like a left-handed scoop pass from the right wing to the left corner that hits the shooter literally in their shooting pocket. And he does this all no look because he's staring at his teammate on the left wing, basically to misdirect the defense. It's ridiculous. Maybe I'll put a clip in here for the audience to see. This is like a level of passing that I think only Luka Doncic could achieve. He throws the basketball literally like a baseball, like a football, like a bowling ball. He has those underhanded full court passes. He has every arm angle Matt Stafford, Pat Mahomes kind of thing. He can put velocity on it with both hands. I just think with some improvement in his decision making, he'll be the second best passer or best passer in the NBA probably within the next 2 years. I have more to say, but I'm going to stop there because I could just ramble about LaMelo for an hour, but I want to get your thoughts, some feedback, so far.
I mean, the thing I like the most about projecting his upside, well, there's two things actually, and it's gonna sound similar to what we were talking about with Maxey, but team situation, the team is his. So if he stays healthy and he makes the improvement he does, the sky is the limit for there's nothing getting in his way. I know Brandon Miller's they value him, but I think that Miller, they're seeing, and correctly, as more of a Paul George two-way off-ball type. He does some cool things off the ball. He can be interactive with LaMelo, and with LaMelo taking on a Halliburton, Trae Young, Helio type profile. And then the second thing, and again, I said something similar with Maxey, there's some low-hanging fruit here for the guy. He's never had an above-average true shooting percentage ever. And this is despite him clearly being a good free throw shooter, clearly being a fine three-point shooter, and having the size to, get to the rim and be a good finisher. There's no reason for him to be below average efficiency. There's every reason to expect, if the team starts caring about winning more, or he starts, he just makes an improvement in terms of his shot mapping. If he gets, 56, 55% true shooting up and closer to 60 or above 60, that right there is just pretty low hanging fruit in terms of offensive impact. And we talk about him at the rim. Dude, he's never been above the 20th percentile in efficiency at the rim. This is a 6'8" guard who's immensely skilled. That has to go up. It almost has to. And then his turnover percentage, you just mentioned his decision making. Look, when you carry a usage that high, turnovers are going to come. Not everybody can be a Tyrese Maxey or a Jalen Brunson type who's just never turns it over in spite of carrying a high usage. But of course, his decision making can get better. So, yeah, I mean, I like LaMelo Ball as a player a lot. I think the thing that would have me hesitant would be, I'm just not sure what direction the Hornets want to go. Do they even want, of course, if he was an MVP candidate, of course they want that. But I'm saying, is there a part of them that's actually we want to take an even further step back next year, build around Brandon Miller and Cooper Flagg? And is there a chance he just gets traded, or something like that? Is it possible the Hornets aren't the team for LaMelo? Does LaMelo want to be on the Hornets long term? These are things that, could he be a superstar in 3 years? Of course, but we're talking about guys we think could make the superstar leap next season. To me, that's, aside from his injury, that's the biggest potential hindrance for him is, do the Hornets just suck so bad next season that LaMelo checks out, or they just start shopping him around? And of course, as we know, it's very rare for a guy to change teams midseason and then make an all-NBA team.
Yeah, that's a good point. I just think he's going to force their hand, honestly. I think he's just going to be so good. I love that you brought up his finishing. That was really my next thing that I wanted to talk about. The guy finishes like Trae Young at the rim. That is basically, he's consistently in the teens in percentile efficiency at the rim, which makes no sense given that he's 6 or 7 inches taller than Trae Young, and he has a sick finishing package. He has great layups, he has amazing touch, he has one of the best floaters in the game. Literally has one of the best floaters in the entire league already. So I to me, like you said, that just has to go up. I think there's no possibility for that to stay the same or get worse. It will go up. It's just a matter of how much. He's not super explosive, so I'm sure that's part of what goes into it. He's listed at 180 pounds, which is kind of crazy that, at 6'7". But I just believe basically on his skill and touch in that area, his finishing has to improve. As a shooter, you mentioned that he's a good shooter. I actually think he's a great shooter. I think he's already a great shooter, not even projecting forward already. He's had back-to-back seasons where he shot over 40% on catch and shoot threes. In his one really full season where he played 73 games, he shot 43% on catch and shoot threes. He also consistently shoots 35% or better on pull-ups, which is really good. For reference, Luka Doncic in the 3 years before this last one where he went completely crazy, shot about 35% from three on pull-ups. So that's 3 years consecutively that Luka Doncic shot the same 35% from three on pull-ups that LaMelo shoots. And, similar difficulty shot diet. LaMelo takes really bad and difficult shots. So to me, LaMelo is already a great shooter and potentially has the chance to be an elite 3-point shooter if he cleans up his, let's say he goes crazy and has a Luka Doncic kind of leap from pull-ups. He can definitely do that. But all he has to do is really clean up his shot diet a little bit more, given that he consistently shoots around 86% from the free throw line, and is already incredible in terms of his open free throw shooting. So to me, I hear your point about the Hornets potentially. What are they doing? How do they look to begin the season? I just think he's going to force their hand. I think we're talking about a player who already has elite impact metrics before 23, is already an elite passer before 23, already has elite finishing talent, not finishing efficiency yet, but has the talent, already has elite shooting indicators, has unique size and shiftiness, given his wingspan, his height, his speed and transition. And it's super easy to forget this. Like, this is another thing that I was looking up. He had a stretch after his rough start to begin the season across 10 games. And in those 10 games, right before he got injured, he put up 30 points per game on 49% from the field, 43% from three, to go along with 6 rebounds, 8 assists, and over 1 steal. And 2 of those games were against the Knicks. So I those are the ones that I watched like full. And he was literally unguardable. Like, I just think that this monster output, like I just said, 36 and 8 on 43% from three shooting, I think that's representative of close to where he'll eventually end up. And I just think that he's going to force the Hornets' hand. They're going to have to build around him. He's going to be the offensive engine. And in my opinion, he just definitely is going to be the next superstar in the NBA. I'll at least say he's going to be the next superstar in the NBA, in my opinion. But at the very least, he will be a superstar at some point, given health. I will bet as soon as this coming year is going to happen. But the only thing that can stop it, in my opinion, is injuries.
So I'm going to spin a similar question that you asked me earlier back to you. I feel like when you look at the East, you've got almost 2 tiers, but maybe we can call it 3 because there's kind of a middle class. Like, I would put the Hawks and the Heat in this weird middle class. And then you have the top. There's 5 or 6 teams at the top that, the Celtics are at the top of, but there's the Magic, there's the Knicks, there's the Pacers, there's the Bucks, there's the Knicks, there's the Sixers, and the Celtics. So 7 teams, and the Celtics are almost certainly number 1. And then you have the Hawks and the Heat. I think that the bottom of the East is considered very, very weak. There's the Pistons, there's the Wizards, there's the Bulls, there's the Nets. And I think most people would have put the Hornets in that group. Do you see the Hornets as more in that middle class with the Heat and the Hawks?
Yeah,
I forgot the Raptors, but yeah. Would you put the Hornets above the Raptors and with the Hawks and the Heat, or do you think they're better than the Hawks and the Heat? I mean, it sounds like you think that LaMelo would be the best player on any of those teams, maybe.
I think that I told you I'm just gonna sound crazy today. That's fine. I'm okay with that. Yeah, no, I think he's in that. I think the Hornets will be slightly below that tier. So I think there is a tier break, and the Hornets are probably in a tier alone, below the Hawks and the Heat, but above those other teams. I think they're going to have a sneaky good offense with LaMelo at the helm, and I think LaMelo, maybe not this year, but will soon be the best point guard in the East. And that is better than Brunson. That's better than Mitchell. That's better than Halliburton. I think he's going to be the best point guard in the East. I think he's going to start that ascension this year. And given that they have some pretty good spacing with Grant Williams, Seth Curry, Josh Green, who they picked up, Brandon Miller, obviously, who you just talked about. I mean, Bridges can space a little bit. Yep. I mean, he has functional spacing, as you would say.
He does.
And And then I just think they have. I'm going to throw in Vasily Micic, who I've been high on, who I thought the OKC made a mistake by trading him for Gordon Hayward. That did not make sense to me. I think he's going to play real minutes and be good, and he can shoot. And then in transition, they have guys who can finish. They have Mark Williams, who we haven't seen much of, but when we have seen him on the court, he's been really, really good and shown a ton of upside. Yep. A really good pick and roll partner for LaMelo. The French kid that they brought in, I don't know how to pronounce his name, with the 6th pick, he could be a serious threat in transition as well, maybe as soon as this year. As far as transition threat, I don't think he'll do anything else. So I think offensively, they're going to be really, really good. I think they're going to surprise a ton of people offensively as long as LaMelo's on the court. Defensively is going to be a problem. It's not going to be good. They're going to give up a lot of points, and so they're going to be one of these teams that scores a ton and gives up a ton. So given that, I think they'll shake out to be kind of right below that tier of teams that you mentioned in terms of the Hawks and the Heat. So I think that'll still be enough, because I think people will look at it as like, damn, LaMelo literally is just carrying this team to potentially compete, to contend for a play-in spot. And so I think that's going to even bode more well for his perception as a superstar earlier on.
Yeah, I mean, I know they don't have good depth, of course. Like, what team that isn't very good is going to have nice bench pieces? But they do have playable bench pieces. And if you look at their projected starting lineup, there's a lot of potential improvement there, and there's some solid synergy. So for those who don't know, their projected starting lineup is LaMelo Ball, Brandon Miller, Josh Green, Miles Bridges, and Mark Williams. Mark Williams, Josh Green, and Brandon Miller should all get better. Like, just that's what happens when you're that age. They're all really young. There's no reason not to expect them to get better. 3 of those guys can shoot. 3 of the guys playing off LaMelo can shoot. I don't think any of the non-LaMelo players are bad defenders. Mark Williams, the impact metrics love him. Say what you want about Miles Bridges, the person. The basketball player has proven to be a very, very good player when he's healthy. If you go back and look at his 2022 season before he got suspended, his 23-year-old season, an elite season by most impact metrics. There's nothing but positive signs around Brandon, but positive signs around Brandon Miller. That's a good player, and he's going to get better. Josh Green profiles as someone who should be one of those additive pieces we're always talking about. They're not going to do what Dallas was trying to do with him and try to like run initiation possessions through him. He's only going to be there to shoot threes and defend, which are the 2 things he does best. So I don't know if LaMelo has the type of season you expect him to have, and they get relative good health luck around him with guys like Mark Williams, who's, as you alluded to, struggled with injuries in the past. I don't see why they can't be a play-in team, the 9 seed, the 8 seed, which they were back-to-back seasons with LaMelo Ball fully healthy. So I think that should be their expectation if LaMelo makes this leap.
100%. I expect them to be a play-in team. I expect them to push for the 8 seed, something like that. But probably settle in right around like 9 or something. But I definitely think they're going to be surprising to teams because of how bad they were last year when LaMelo didn't play. And I think that he's just going to get all the credit for it. And I think it'll be deserved because, like I said, basically the argument that I've made with all of his impact metrics, with every data point that I could find about LaMelo Ball in terms of like what you can use to project players in the future relative to their age, relative to how they've produced, he just has it. He has big, flashing, bright, blinding red lights in terms of what his potential is. And I think that if he's healthy, they've surrounded him with enough decent pieces that their offense can really thrive. So I think we'll see that moving forward.
Not to throw a wrench into things, but you just mentioned how bad the Hornets were without LaMelo Ball. The Wowie data, when you look at LaMelo and Mark Williams, is really interesting because it's very small samples, but the Hornets were really bad when neither played. They were okay when both played. They had a minus 2.5 net rating, which on a team like the Hornets is fine. They were really bad when LaMelo played without Mark Williams, just 430 minutes, but they lost by almost 12 points per 100 possessions. But when Mark Williams played without LaMelo, they actually won those minutes. So again, this isn't, I think the samples are so small that it's almost meaningless. But I do think there's a lot of indicating data that Mark Williams is a really helpful player.
Yeah, I think that if there was anything I would extract from those data is just that Mark Williams is probably pretty good and is a positive player, but that's pretty much the extent of what I would pull from it, just given the sample sizes. I definitely lean on the impact metrics here in terms of what LaMelo is adding, and he's super consistent across the board in terms of his offensive impact, such that I think we can be pretty much positive that he's a very, very high level offensive player already in terms of his impact, and has nowhere but up to go. So we'll see it play out